So Penn State is in the Peach Bowl, 2.5 point favorite, 47.5 total set by FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. Penn State coming into this one at number 10, according to the College Football Playoff Committee, and Ole Miss, number 11. This is one of the most ideal matchups you could have asked for across the board as a college football fan, spectator, as Penn State and Ole Miss fans alike. These are two teams that, yes, while the season's finished at 10-2, I'm sure that Ole Miss had college football playoff aspirations as well. But even though the expectations fell a little short for both squads, these are two teams that certainly have not packed it in. There's going to be not some players are going to opt out on both sides. We expect that, but a bulk of both teams are going to be present for this one. And as you can see, FanDuel thinks this is going to be a close game, a struggle back and forth, making for good college football, entertaining college football, as bowl season can be hit or miss because of all the changes that come over the next month. But this game on Saturday, December 30th, set for a noon Eastern time kickoff. This is a New Year's Six game. I just want to clarify for some people because it isn't on New Year's Day, but it is part of the New Year's Six bowl slate. As I said, we saw this one coming. We knew that Penn State was going to be in the Peach Bowl. It was just a matter of who they were going to face. The evidence was there, okay? I can make that prediction because it was easy to read in between the lines. The Peach Bowl executives, the committee themselves said that Penn State makes a lot of sense for us. And it's like, yeah, it does. Penn State does make a lot of sense for you because the Nittany Lions have never been to the Peach Bowl in its existence, now dubbed the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. But since the late 90s, since the Peach Bowl has been a bowl game, Penn State has never been invited. That's how these things work. Depending on where you rank your prestige, the bowl committees sit back and say, which two schools, which two teams make the most sense for us? Okay, there's a little bit of a discussion based on what the College Football Playoff Committee thinks, but no one points and tells them, okay, you're taking those two teams. You have to take the 7 and the 10. You have to take the 10 and the 11. It works out in this case. Like I said, this is an ideal matchup across the board because you are going to get good quality college football late in the season. But there's no mathematical formula. There's nothing that the only thing that these bowls have to abide by is some of them have to take an SEC team. Some of them have to take the ACC team, the best one. Others have the at-large, and for the Peach Bowl, they have the two at-large selections. Penn State was one of them. Ole Miss was the other. So you're getting a Big Ten SEC matchup, but the Peach Bowl has the flexibility to get and pick whatever school they want to. We speculated, could it be Oklahoma? Could it be Missouri? Ole Miss? Not too. I feel like those three schools in that category, good matchups for Penn State. Now, I like this matchup. I do like this matchup against Ole Miss, and I'm going to talk about them a little more in the second segment. But this is a good offensive team when you look at it. I mean, Lane Kiffin's an offensive coach, but I gotta admit, I honestly preferred Oklahoma a little more. I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. It could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse because Liberty was out there. I know Tulane ended up losing to SMU, but Penn State could have faced one of those two teams in an at-large selection. And I am so glad that Oregon is playing the likes of Liberty and Penn State is not. So my preference was Oklahoma because I really like that offense and what they're able to do. However, I'm not going to complain because this is an SEC matchup, and everybody says down south, oh, the SEC football's different. The Big Ten can't hang with the SEC schools. We get to find out. We do. And like I said, both of these rosters will be mostly intact. I don't think there are going to be any surprise opt-outs here. Penn State was never going to be left out of a New Year's Six Bowl. I know that people on the internet, because it's easy, right, to put bad takes out there that Penn State doesn't belong in a New Year's Six Bowl, and the committees would never even consider taking them. But this is a top 10 team. The College Football Playoff Committee thought so. They're number 10, never been to a Peach Bowl. So, like I said, the way that the committees don't want the same teams over and over and over again. Penn State has never been. The Fiesta Bowl and the Cotton Bowl have taken Penn State in the past decade here. The Peach Bowl has never had them. Like I said, since the late 90s, since it became a regular bowl game. But outside of Indiana, well, Penn State's best win is Iowa and they really don't deserve it because they just beat up on a bunch of cupcakes. You beat up on a 8-4 West Virginia team, may I remind you. You beat up on the Big Ten West champion. These weren't close games. Penn State didn't beat West Virginia by a field goal or 7 points. Same thing with Iowa. They beat Iowa 31-0, better than Michigan did. And they beat an 8-4 West Virginia team that was very competitive in the Big 12. So the people that say, well, Penn State doesn't have the resume or the strength of schedule, your only losses were to Michigan, who's in the college football playoff, and Ohio State, who was in the conversation to be placed in the college football playoff this season. And those losses were by margins of 8 points on the road and 9 points at home, both of which should have been single score games. That's besides the point, but they were single digit deficits. And so don't tell me that, well, Penn State, the only team they struggled with was Indiana, where they should have, again, beaten them handedly. They didn't. But all the other opponents, they did. And that's very telling. Penn State was very good at handling business, no matter you can only do with what's on your schedule. And that's why I want to rant about the committee and Florida State a little bit. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Ole Miss is a great measuring stick to know how good Penn State actually is. The everydayers remember me saying this, and I'll say it again because why not? I like beating this drum. I like this tune. Penn State is in college football purgatory. Not good enough to play with Ohio State and Michigan, and probably not really so Georgia, Alabama. Basically, those top 6 teams, the elite teams, the elite schools right now. But Penn State, well, they're beating up on Utah. They beat up, I know Memphis, right, in the Cotton Bowl not too long ago. Handled Washington, no problem in the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State is not good enough to be with the elite teams, but still a little too good for the above average, really competitive teams. And Ole Miss is the next one up on this slate because they blew Utah out of the water in the Rose Bowl game. Ole Miss can give us an idea of how good Penn State actually is. Is it truly they are a step behind Michigan and Ohio State, or is it a large gap? How large is the gap? We're going to know because Penn State, this is a comparable game. FanDuel says so. FanDuel thinks this one's going to be close at 2.5 to open up the game. Ole Miss, great passing game, top 15 in the country, well coached and all around talented. And as I mentioned, number 11 in the country and from the SEC conference. Okay. ACC, a little bit of a weaker Power 5. And I know I'm going to save that for Florida State, but they're not getting they're not getting a game from a team that's in the Group 5 or in the ACC where it's like, okay, well, we know that Penn State is that much better. The SEC, that is a challenge to see just how good this team actually is. Penn State gets the best case scenario here. Best case scenario. They could have drawn a matchup like Liberty, SMU, Tulane, and I don't think anybody would have been enticed. I don't think anybody would have been excited for this game. You could have been placed in a lower caliber bowl. They could have been left out of the New Year's Six. But from an entertainment standpoint, from a prestige standpoint, Penn State's going for its 4th New Year's Six bowl win in the past decade here. You got to be impressed somewhere. I know the fans and myself wanted to see a college football playoff berth, but to go for 4 New Year's Six bowl titles under James Franklin, they're going to have to build another trophy case. And I hope it can expand even further